From chilling murders to twisted motives, today we delve into the minds of the 15 worst serial killers in modern history. But what drives someone to commit such horrific acts? In today's video, we're uncovering the terrifying stories behind the 15 worst serial killers of modern history. These individuals left behind a trail of devastation, their motives and actions forever etched into the darkest corners of criminal history. We'll examine their backgrounds, the terror they inflicted, and the chilling details that make them unforgettable. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel Court Capture and ring the bell to stay updated on our latest videos. If you're ready to explore the sinister lives of some of the most infamous killers, let's get started. Quince. Pedro Alonso Lopez. Pedro Alonso Lopez, known as the Monster of the Andes, is a notorious serial killer from Colombia who is believed to have murdered more than 300 young girls across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru in the 1970s and 1980s. His brutal killing spree was marked by his methodical approach, often luring his victims under the guise of offering them work. Lopez was arrested in 1980 after being caught in the act and later confessed to the killings. He was convicted and sentenced to prison, but his fate remains unclear, as reports suggest he may have been released in the 1990s. 14. Peter Sutcliffe. Peter Sutcliffe, known as the Yorkshire Ripper, was a British serial killer responsible for the murders of at least 13 women and the attempted murder of 7 others between 1975 and 1980. Sutcliffe targeted women, primarily sex workers, in and around Yorkshire. He was known for using a hammer and a knife in his brutal attacks. His killings sparked widespread fear, and his identity eluded police for years. Sutcliffe was finally arrested in 1981 after being caught with false number plates. He was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. Sutcliffe died in 2020 while serving his sentence. 13. Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper is one of history's most infamous and unidentified serial killers, active in London's Whitechapel district in 1888. The killer was responsible for the brutal murders of at least 5 women, often referred to as the canonical 5. The victims, all prostitutes, were mutilated with precision, and the nature of the killing suggested a deep knowledge of anatomy. Despite widespread media attention and numerous investigations, Jack the Ripper was never caught, and his identity remains a mystery to this day. The case continues to fascinate criminologists, historians, and the public, sparking endless theories. 12th. Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader, known as the BTK Killer, bind, torture, kill, terrorized Kansas for over 30 years. His killing spree began in 1974 with the brutal murders of 4 members of the Otero family. He later claimed at least 10 victims, sending chilling letters to the media, taunting authorities with details of his crimes. Rader evaded capture for decades, continuing his correspondence until 2004 when DNA evidence led to his arrest. In court, Rader confessed to his heinous crimes, citing a need for control and satisfaction. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences and is currently incarcerated. 11th. Albert Fish. Albert Fish, known as the Gray Man or the Brooklyn Vampire, was an infamous American serial killer active in the early 20th century. He is believed to have murdered and cannibalized several children, though he confessed to the murders of at least 5. Fish was notorious for his disturbing letters to the families of his victims, describing in detail his horrific acts. He preyed on young boys and girls, often luring them with promises of work or food. After his arrest, Fish was convicted and executed by electric chair in 1936. His chilling crimes have become part of America's darkest criminal history. Zainter Jack Unterweger. Jack Unterweger was an Austrian serial killer, journalist, and writer, infamous for his string of murders during the 1990s. He was initially convicted of a murder in 1976 and sentenced to life in prison, but he was released in 1990 after advocating for his innocence and gaining public sympathy. However, after his release, Unterweger's killing spree resumed. He is believed to have murdered at least 11 women, primarily sex workers in Austria, Germany, and the United States. Unterweger often lured his victims by pretending to be a journalist interested in writing about their lives. His crimes were characterized by the same brutal, methodical patterns, and he taunted police by writing about the murders in his articles. After being apprehended in 1994, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. In 1994, Unterweger committed suicide in his cell while awaiting the outcome of an appeal, leaving behind a chilling legacy. 9. Andrei Chikatilo. Andrei Chikatilo, known as the Butcher of Rostov, was a Soviet serial killer convicted of 52 murders between 1978 and 1990. His victims, mostly women and children, were brutally attacked and mutilated. Chikatilo's crimes evaded detection for years due to his cunning and the complexities of the case. He was arrested in 1990, convicted in 1992, and executed by firing squad in 1994, leaving behind a legacy of horror. 8. David Berkowitz. David Berkowitz, infamously known as the Son of Sam, struck fear into New York City from 1976 to 1977. He murdered 6 people and wounded 7 others in a series of shootings targeting young couples. Berkowitz claimed that a demon, speaking through his neighbor's dog, instructed him to kill. Arrested in 1977, Berkowitz was convicted and sentenced to 25 years to life, later expressing remorse for his actions. Yedinci Ed Gein. Ed Gein, known as the Butcher of Plainfield, was a notorious American murderer and body snatcher. Active in the 1950s, he exhumed corpses from local graves and created grotesque items from their skin and bones, including masks and furniture. His crimes inspired characters like Norman Bates, Psycho, and Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Gein was arrested in 1957 and found guilty of mental incompetence, institutionalized until he died in 1984. 6. Gary Ridgway. Gary Ridgway, known as the Green River Killer, murdered at least 49 women in Washington state during the 1980s and 1990s. He targeted sex workers and young women, strangling them. Ridgway was arrested in 2001, later confessing to the killings. In exchange for a life sentence, he led investigators to undiscovered victims, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history. Cinquiem Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos, an infamous American serial killer, was responsible for the murders of 7 men in Florida between 1989 and 1990. A former prostitute, she claimed she was killed in self-defense during attempted sexual assaults. Convicted and sentenced to death, Wuornos was executed in 2002. Her case gained widespread media attention, sparking debates on justice, mental health, and female serial killers. 4. Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez, infamously known as the Night Stalker, unleashed terror across Southern California between 1984 and 1985. He was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, and 11 sexual assaults. His crimes were marked by satanic symbols and extreme brutality. 3. Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, was convicted of 17 murders between 1978 and 1991. His gruesome acts included necrophilia, dismemberment, and cannibalism. Dahmer targeted young men, luring them to his home, where he committed horrific crimes. His case shocked the world, highlighting his disturbing psychological profile and obsession with control. 2. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy, the Killer Clown, was convicted of 33 murders of young men and boys between 1972 and 1978. Gacy lured victims to his home, where he tortured, raped, and killed them. His persona as a well-known community member, even performing as a clown at children's parties, shocked the public. Gacy's victims were buried under his house or discarded in nearby rivers, making his crimes one of the most chilling in U.S. history. First, Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was a notorious American serial killer who confessed to the brutal murders of 30 women during the 1970s, though the true number is believed to be higher. Charismatic and manipulative, he used his charm to gain his victims' trust before abducting, assaulting, and murdering them. Bundy often revisited crime scenes to further desecrate the bodies. Despite multiple arrests and escapes, he was eventually captured and executed in 1989. His chilling crimes continue to fascinate and terrify. Thanks for watching, stay tuned for more stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel Court Capture for updates.